Hey there, it's 3 o'clock on a Tuesday, and we all know what that means. Another live stream of Behind Breaking Bond. Obviously, you are watching this because you care about what Harris County is currently going through. The crime is skyrocketing, and a lot of it has to do with repeat violent offenders out on multiple felony bonds. Joining me is...
Hey, it's Andy Kahan, Director of Victim Services, Victim Advocacy of Crime Stoppers of Houston. That is the whitest shirt. I mean,
it's glowing, right?
I mean, this is like Mr. Clean over here. So
it is kind of bright.
Yes, we are contrasting today.
Yes. Also joining me is Paul Castro. Paul Castro, for the folks out there, tell them about how you kind of ended up in the whole criminal justice system.
Yeah, so I'm a member of a club I never wanted to be a part of. Lifelong membership, the dues are high and you can't get out. My son, David Castro, was killed July 6th of 2021. And so I'm now a part of the club that Crime Stoppers supports, and that's the parents of murdered children.
You've been very active in the whole bond situation. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so when the person accused of David's murder was arrested, found out that the person was given a $350,000 bond. And I was told that that was higher than average and, hopefully enough to keep it behind bars. Not even a month later, I got a phone call from the Texas Vine Network, which is an automated system, and it keeps up with people who are behind bars, who you're affiliated with. And in this case, it was his accused killer. And it said that he had been released on bond. It was Friday. It was about 6 p.m. in the afternoon. And it turns out, this company, Able Bond, owned by a woman named Shiva Maharab, had bonded him out. And I sat there and scratched my head. How is it that 10% of $350,000 was achieved? And come to find out, as we went through the process, that there was no guarantee that dollar amount would be 10%, that it could be as low as 2%. And later, from Ms. Maharab's own mouth, it could be as low as 0%. And so when I found that out, I helped organize a number of other families and community members to say, this has to change. And so we petitioned the Harris County Bail Bond Board, and Harris County Commissioners and the Bail Bond Board put together something and have now created in local statute. If you're going to be accused of one of these, I think it's 11 crimes.
Right.
They're all
pretty much all violent crimes. Yeah.
They're all violent crimes. Yeah. Then you have to pay 10%. And so this past Bail Bond Board meeting, they actually went even a step further, where all of those records are going to have to be put on file and made public. So
that's huge.
It is. It is.
And Randy and I have been doing this for a long time. And like most people, we all assumed it was a minimum, maximum 10%.
Yeah.
And we never thought it would be less until all of a sudden we started hearing rumblings about cases, like this, and then finding out that the person who bonded out the murder of your son was one of the bail bonding agencies that was on the record.
Yep.
As state, and that was key. I mean, so you have someone on the record saying that they do give bonds less than 10%, and in some cases even lower than 5%.
And you were pretty instrumental in getting this to change to where it has to be in Harris County 10% for certain violent crimes.
Yeah, so I think in a lot of cases, I think the public sees that, a murder has happened and they think to themselves, oh, thank God, right? But that wouldn't be me. In our case, coming back from an Astros game, stuck in traffic, and some crazy person chases us down and takes 2 shots, and one of them, murdering my son. I think hundreds of thousands of Houstonians, if not millions, could say, I've gone to an Astros game. I could have been in that spot. And so I think because people could resonate with the story, they were more engaged.
Right.
And so because of that, we were able to leverage some political capital. And, the fact that the Harris County Court of Commissioners, you have 5 people, 3 Democrats, 2 Republicans, voted 5-0 to support this measure, I think speaks to what's possible in our community, which is coming across the line and saying, crime should not be a partisan issue.
No.
Community safety should not be partisan. I have a lot of family members who are Democrats, a lot who are Republicans. None of them says to themselves in the morning, gosh, I hope we're light on crime today. I hope we're light on criminals. And I hope we let these terrible people out on bond. We're all unified in that. And so I think because of that, very importantly, people called, so I put out calls to the community to say, hey, here are the members of the bail bond board, call them, here are their phone numbers. People did, people sent emails, and people most importantly showed up on the day that the bail bond board met.
Yeah, it was packed.
It was
yes.
packed. Yeah, and we were told, the chairman, the chairwoman of the first meeting in March said, well, our last meeting was 2 minutes long, and I think this one will be a little bit longer. Well, it was 3 hours long. It failed due to some people abstaining. But we came back, we weren't going to give up. And so the public kept the pressure on. The public let them know we're paying attention. And almost all of these members are elected positions, but elected to something else and serving here. They all of a sudden understood people are watching. And what would have been an easy abstention instead turned into, we expect you to vote yes on this. And the yes votes happened. And even though there were 2 abstentions on the last one, we're going to hold those people accountable too.
I know that. There's still a lot unknown about the bonding company that you mentioned. What was it, a couple of weeks ago? The FBI, they have a big raid. They're out there picking up files. You came out and I talked to you that day, and I could tell that you were.
How did you find out about the raid?
I was following, and one of the other news stations, a reporter posted that. I just happened to be eating lunch. I was on break. I was eating lunch, and I saw that, and I thought, Able Bond, that's the group that let out David. And so as soon as I saw that, I went back and I went to the county clerk's records, and sure enough, that was the company. And so I called my secretary and I said, I'm going in, I'm going out there. So I drove straight out to the site, and it was all cordoned off, and I found out that it was the anti-gang task force, and that piqued my interest even more.
It's really going to be interesting to see exactly what comes out of that. But I could see in your face that you were at least glad to see that something was happening. Now people are starting to listen, and I think people are putting 2 and 2 together, because if you have these people out, especially on a payment plan, you're out on bond, you're supposed to do this payment plan. How are you going to get the money? Well, more than likely by robbing somebody or committing a crime.
Right. And I had a person off the record who's a former ADA say, hey, Paul, so I used to be an ADA. I used to be a defense attorney. Here's what actually happens. And when they laid out, in a case like this, discount bond, right? So the discount bond happens, and then the balance. So let's say in the case of David's accused, $35,000 is the amount that person's on the hook for, that family's on the hook for. But if they only put down 7 towards the 35, that leaves a balance of $28,000. There are no guidelines or no restrictions on the APR and the payment plan terms for that $28,000. So conceivably, the person could say, the bail bondsman could say, you have to pay me $500 every 2 weeks, right? And if you don't, I'm going to call the judge, report that you violated bond conditions, and they're going to hook you up and take you back to jail. Well, that's an easy one for a criminal. A criminal's going to say, well, I'm going to get my hands on $500.
Right.
They don't have a job. They can't get hired. They lost their job because they're accused of a terrible crime. They've already tapped out their family members for the amount that they were able to pull together to put down and for that down payment. Now they're on the hook for something stupid. And so what happened in the case of Mark Medina, you have a person who said, who was like, oh, I need the money. I needed the money because otherwise they're going to put me back in jail. Well, if the option is I'm going to hurt you or I'm going to go back to jail, the criminal mindset is I'm going to hurt you.
Right.
Last year, last August, in the murder of the off-duty New Orleans police sergeant in the Grotto, when 3 assailants came up and tried to jack them for their jewelry, ended up shooting and killing them. Their MO, the motive for doing that was the guy's brother in jail that was ordering them to rob people to raise money to bond him out. And they have that recorded on the call. That's what they were doing.
And something else too, that it doesn't look like you automatically assume, or I always thought that, okay, if I'm on some big bond, and I mean, let's say that I have to put my mother's house up for collateral,
Right.
and I run away, they're gonna take my mother's house. There doesn't seem to be any, very few courts actually do anything to get the money, right?
Right. So one of the things I've learned, and I've learned way too much. One of the things I've learned is in order for the forfeiture. So what would happen in that case is, so I commit a crime, and the bail bondsman says, hey, this happened. What they can actually do is go to the judge and ask for what's called a revocation.
Yeah.
And the revocation is, he's on you, right? And that's it. And a judge may issue a revocation versus a forfeiture. A forfeiture is the bail bondsman's on the hook. Revocation is, well, it didn't really happen, and good luck.
And isn't that what we see?
That's what we've seen time and time and time again. Yes.
Another disturbing thing that we've been telling you about. Did you have a question,
Yeah,
sir?
before we continue, because some people have been coming on late because of the technical difficulties
Beyond your control.
beyond my control. If you could explain what you guys are doing right now, what you're talking about, just real quick, just so they know.
Well, we're going on, I'm sorry, we're going on a different subject matter right now, but what we've been talking about is the situation where there for a while, there were some bonding companies that would allow a defendant to just cough up 2 or 3% of the bond amount, which we always thought that it was a standard 10%. Paul Castro learned that one the hard way. He and other people went to commissioner's court and changed it. So now in Harris County, with certain violent crimes, you have to post 10% of the bond amount. That's what we were talking about a couple months ago.
And going back on what you were saying, Paul, and this is something that I've harped on, is I would, and I'm sure you would, and others would like to know, and even you, Randy Wallace, as a reporter, might want to know, who are the individuals that were released on a less than 10% bond? Who are they? The offenses, have any of them reoffended? And that's what I really want to know. Do you think that will ever happen?
No.
Will we find that out?
No, because I think that you've got, I mean, I hate to say this, but I think you've got judges who don't want anybody to know that, even though maybe they didn't know at the time, or the bonding company doesn't want to.
But we know essentially because the local newspaper ran a story, and they said how many offenders they identified that were released on a less than 10% bond. I actually asked the 2 reporters, which I'm known to do, hey, out of curiosity, have any of them gone on to reoffend? For whatever reasons beyond my comprehension, they wouldn't answer the question. And to me, it was very simple. I was just a very simple. I wasn't even asking for their data. I just, look, I'm curious.
But when you look at everything that we've come across for breaking bond, it's almost sometimes by accident, right? You'll see somebody that, okay, so-and-so is charged with murder. You research that defendant and then find that they were out on multiple felony bonds.
That's how this all started. Yeah.
Right. Nobody, and again, this is the most mind-blowing thing to me. No one, to our knowledge, within Harris County, no entity is tracking the number of these people that are now wanted fugitives.
No, there's no one in the country that's doing this.
Does that make
I've
sense?
been asked, well, what about other cities? And I'm like, good question. Ask them. I don't know. I can speak for what is happening in Harris County because it's a project that Crime Stoppers undertook on their own. And again, I'm just looking at those that are out on bond for multiple offenses,
Right.
charged with murder. I can't even shudder to think what the other offenses.
How many committed aggravated robberies? How many committed sexual assaults? Yeah, and it's like, you would think that, why don't other people want to know this? Why doesn't Harris County, the leaders of Harris County want an actual list? Look at this. We've got whatever it is. I would venture to say it's hundreds.
Right now, sadly today, because you had a 9-year-old girl that was murdered over last night, and the offender now wanted for her murder was on at least 5 multiple bonds, and was also had another offense from Fort Bend County, and that's all within the last year or so. I mean, you have multiple felonies, you have bond revocations, you have bond reinstatements and so forth. So as a result of what happened last night, sadly, I'm up to 175 people that have now been murdered by that category in Harris County, and the majority of those since 2020.
And another disturbing thing about that, and this is what I was going to segue into, how many times have we seen defendants, they're out on bond for felon in possession of a weapon? That was the case too with your son's alleged killer.
He had already been released, but
But he had that in his past.
Yes, he did. He had 2 armed robberies in his past.
We all hear about, the concern over gun violence. Why isn't anybody up in arms over the fact that you have all of these judges that they are looking at the charge of felon in possession of a weapon like it's no big deal? You have discovered many low bonds for that.
I started looking at this a few days ago, and it's just something that I thought was worthy of looking at. So I started looking at offenders that were charged with felon in possession of a weapon, which means a firearm or a gun. And I'd say in the last 2 days, I can count them on my 2 hands, maybe take off a few fingers, of the ones that have been charged that have actually been released on bond. And I'm looking at the bond numbers of what they were released on bond. I'm going 2,500, 5,000. And I'm like, it's minuscule at the best. And we're talking someone who's already been convicted of a felony.
Right.
And in one of these cases, he's already been convicted of felon in possession of a firearm. And he's back out on bond on a $5,000 bond. And I'm going, you wonder why we got problems?
Right. I mean, come on. If there's anybody that you don't want to have a gun, is a convicted felon. Isn't that aren't they kind of saying to you, I'm up to no good because I have a gun? They know they should not have a gun. They know that it's a violation of parole, right? If you were out on parole.
I have one guy who's on parole that was charged with felon in possession of a firearm, back out on bond.
It's almost like these judges look at that charge like, well, that's no big deal. You showed me something a minute ago. It looked like somebody got a higher bond for possession of a controlled substance than they did felon in possession of a weapon.
I did. I'm looking at the numbers, and like I said, this is all documented. It's all right here in black and white and in all the court records. Bond amount 2,500. Bond amount 2,500. Bond made. Bond 2,500. But actually, here's the one we were looking at. Here's the bond 5,000 for felon in possession of a weapon and gun. Yet here's the 10,000 for the drugs.
What's that all about? I mean, hopefully judges will start looking at that charge as more serious than they are now. It should require a higher bond than $5,000 or $10,000. And this is the thing too. We see where people, they're out on bond for that. They violate the conditions of bond. Then they just might get a little higher bond amount, but they're not being revoked. Back in the day, judges, that was a serious thing, wasn't it? If you were out on a bond and you pick up a charge of felon in possession of a weapon, you're going back to jail, because the judge is going to look at that and say, well, you're out on bond, you've committed a crime, and now you have a gun. You do not need to be walking among us, right?
There used to be an adage in Harris County. It was called one bond per customer. Meaning if you're out on bond and you were charged with another offense, especially a felony, which is obviously a violation of your conditions of bond, you weren't getting back out again. And that's not happening anymore.
You made a good point a minute ago, Paul, that we can all do something by the power of voting. And we need to do it not, oh, I'm a Democrat, oh, I'm a Republican, especially when it comes to these judge races. People need to really pay attention to who they're voting for to be a criminal district court judge.
Absolutely. So there's a group of families that have come together. We're creating an organization called Parents for Public Safety. And what we're trying to do is support the efforts of other organizations in the city, but be very, very focused on elections.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we're going to be paying attention to in this upcoming set of elections is the record. And so I don't care what a person says. I want to know what you've done.
Right.
And so a lot of these judges have track records. Some of these judges have even been bold enough to go on the record on TV or in public meetings where they've said things that are offensive to victims' families. I think too many of these judges look at a criminal and look at the victim, and they see the criminal as the more sympathetic character.
Right.
And they align with, they want to protect the rights of the criminal versus what's allegedly, and that's what they emphasize, allegedly happened to the victim and the victim's family, or even worse, the future victims that same criminal will
Right.
victimize in the immediate future. Those judges have opinions, and bully for them. As a voter, I don't want those people representing my community.
Right. Well, and the thing too, we've talked about this many times, there are judges that they're activists. They're more into trying to sort of change the criminal justice system. There are people that don't believe in prisons and that, everybody can be helped. They want to look at it like crime comes down to two things: mental health and drug abuse. Yes, those are two things that do contribute to people leading a life of crime. And yes, there are people that you can take out of the system and you can rehabilitate them and they can be law-abiding, productive citizens. But when someone has 12 convictions and they're out on 7
We've
bonds.
done those stories.
Yes, yeah, we're talking about actual defendants here. We're talking about people that judges have, I keep calling it the revolving door. It's like they spit them back out to wreak havoc on everyone.
I look back at what happened at the Grotto almost a year ago. And I remember you and I discussed it, and I said, I'll take another spin on this. You had a 19-year-old. His name was Frederick Jackson. He's on 5 felony bonds in 2021. He has a prior history before that. Now, in order to get 5 felony bonds, you got to be out here to do that. He had his bond revoked, just like here, bond reinstated. It appears fairly obvious when one looks at this that he was not going to be a law-abiding citizen based on racking up that many. And I said, did you think you did this 19-year-old any favors?
No.
You think you did him a favor by continually releasing him when it was fairly obvious he was just not, he was going to go out and keep. Now you got a 19-year-old, and I'm not absolved, but you got a 19-year-old that's more than likely facing a death penalty.
Yeah.
You didn't do him any favors.
We've seen law officers shot and killed behind this whole multiple bond. We've seen defendants be shot and killed as well. There's really no winners in it. You're not, like Andy said, we're not helping these people by letting them dig this hole where they've got 12, 14 charges of aggravated robbery or whatever it is. You got to wonder how many of them are going to go back to court to begin with. And if you go back to when we've been doing this for probably 2 years, not under the umbrella breaking bond, but looking at this issue and doing stories. And when it first started, a lot of times it wasn't some headline grabbing murder or something that people were aware of. And we would talk about it. Was one of these days this is going to change. And we saw it change. The biggest change was with Martha Medina. I think that just tore everybody apart because here's a grandma going to McDonald's and she's killed by a defendant alleged
followed from a bank.
Right. Yes. Who was out on multiple bonds.
Capital murder bond.
Yeah, a capital murder bond. Again, who in their right mind should have a capital murder bond? I'm facing the possibility of the death sentence or spending the rest of my life in prison, and you're allowing me the opportunity to decide whether or not I'm going to go back on the day of my trial and show up in court.
Paul, going back to the bond thing, I know Senator Whitmire has been a very staunch ally of us and has indicated that he's going to be sponsoring legislation because what we did is great for Harris County. but we want to see this
Statewide.
where we believe it'll have a more of a solid foundation
Right.
if we get it into statute. So coming up this next legislative session, which will begin January of 2023, I know you will be up there, I know the organizations, we will be up there, but we're going to need people's help in getting this passed. And the reason I say that is because last session, when we tried to get a bill passed, which we ended up finally getting passed, which eliminated PR, personal recognizance bonds, for defendants charged with violent offenses. Now, obviously, you were not part of what we were doing back then, but let me tell you, the opposition, and I respect the opposition, and I'm going to tell you why I respect the opposition is because they're organized, they're well-funded, and they show up.
Yeah.
And they showed up. We were outnumbered 79-10 on that bill. And they kept coming on each of the bill. We kept coming, we got it passed, but we need everyone to get involved in this issue. So I know you're going to be asking for everybody's help. We will as well. So it's happening sooner than you think.
And everybody, every single person, we all have a say in this by voting. And we did this before the primary. We kind of reminded everybody of some of the judges, what we told you in breaking bond reports about where they repeatedly let people out. We will be doing the same thing as it gets closer to the November election. We've had a lot of candidates come on here on the live stream and on breaking bond reports. If you're a candidate, we're going to hear from you some more. And of course, if you're a judge, come on here and explain this to us. We are not going to be mean to anybody, are we? Well, you're mean to me. But I'll make sure.
I've been accused of everything, but I've never been accused of being mean. So.
But no, seriously, if you're a criminal district court judge and this is the right thing to do, come on here and explain to us why that is, because I don't understand it. A lot of people don't understand it. And I'm sure that there's a lot of people walking around that's a lot smarter than I am, no doubt about it. But it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make common sense, does it?
Well, there's a saying that I've had, and I'll age myself for 30 years, and that's criminal justice and logic are often oxymoronic terms that have difficult times meeting each other.
Boy, that's
and
true.
You're seeing that firsthand in Harris County.
Yeah. Hey, Paul, thank you so much. Oh, wait a minute.
There's one more thing. What about the people that are that say there's everybody deserves a second chance?
And they do. And I don't know how many times we've said no one should be sitting in jail for a theft charge, a DWI, a drug possession, a nonviolent crime. Those people should not be sitting in jail. They have every right to get a bond and to be out on bond. Everybody should get a chance to get bond. If you, right, that one's a little crazy. But I mean, come on, this is the thing you got to keep in mind. We're not talking about people that they're not on a second chance, right? They're on their umpteenth chance. When do you get to the point where, okay, we've let Randy Wallace out on bond 7 times. What is he doing? He keeps picking up criminal charges. Sure, you could make the argument, well, he hadn't been convicted of them yet, but I'm showing the court and society a pattern, right?
Hey, Paul, were you surprised, and I've been doing this a while, were you surprised to find out how partisan public safety has become? Because
yeah.
It's disturbing to me.
So what I hear is people defending politicians versus defending policy and, most importantly, public safety. I've yet to meet a person on either side of the aisle who hears the facts and who doesn't say that's terrible.
Yeah.
Right? So as an example, if you're a judge and you have, in many cases, this is true, 2 trials in a year, right? And your backlog, you're only clearing 80% of the cases that are coming through your court.
Right.
And then you blame the slow court for the reason why you have to be putting people out on bond. Your hand is on the lever that controls like what's happening.
Right.
And so there has to be accountability somewhere. So for example, Chris Morton, county judge, said, well, these people haven't been convicted of anything. They only have probable cause. And that's why I'm going to continue revoking and reissuing new bonds. Well, his court isn't clearing enough people, enough cases to get him through the process so that he can take care of that situation on his own. He could be running night court. He could be running weekend court. These are the things that we elect and pay them to do. And if he doesn't want to do that, that's understandable, but please make that your public policy. Put that on your webpage. And then we can decide, are you the right person for the work? For
Judge Chris Morton has probably gone on every TV station except Fox 26 because he refuses to talk to me. But you're absolutely right. Why isn't he, when you go on these other stations, are you pointing out how few trials you even have? There are judges down there. It's like they're not doing anything. Right?
But they're not accountable. So there's this misunderstanding, I think, that so as just Joe Q Public, going about my day, doing my work, working 60 hours a week, my expectation is that everyone else is doing their job.
Right.
And what I've come to find out is there's a judge who on her Facebook page talks about selling home goods. That's the job she lists first. She puts district judge underneath that.
Right.
That's the kind of person where I look at and scratch my head and think, oh, I didn't know that being a judge is a part-time job.
Right.
If those are the people representing our community, we need to be aware of that. And as voters, what we shouldn't do is look at skin color, last names, or the D or the R next to their name.
That's right.
You should be making a determination who's the right person to represent me.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And right now, too many people are being taken advantage of by a broken system, and it's a system that we can't give up hope. And I'm afraid that a lot of people out there are just going to throw their hands up and say, what can we do? It's impossible. That's not the case.
It's not impossible.
Register and vote.
Yes.
Hold people accountable. We're going to be putting information out there and talking to our communities and knocking on doors for these upcoming elections. So we're going to let people know, these are the people who are putting the criminals back on the streets. And what's crazy is those judges don't live next door to those criminals.
Right.
And so what we have to do is say to their neighbors, do you like, Philip living next door to you? Because he's there. I'm sure that makes you nervous. Well, the judge who let him loose is blank. And I suggest you, pay attention to that and vote.
And two, we all know, there was Harvey and we went through a pandemic, but things are starting to get back to normal. And there's no reason why one judge can only have 2 or 3 trials in a year when another one can have 12 or 14.
Right.
If I told Fox 26, if I said, look, next year I may do 2 or 3 stories and that's it, they're going to look at me and they're going to say, well, guess what? You don't work for us anymore. Right? Come on. If you said, okay.
The same as me. Yeah, it would be the same thing about,
I'll do a couple of reports every 6 months, but that's all I'm going to do. You'd be shown the door, right?
Paul, I want to just say one thing to you, before we wrap up. As a victim advocate, I applaud you for taking the negative and turning it into positive action for social change. And like I said, I wish I had met you under different circumstances and scenarios, but you're in this position now and you're advocating for changes amongst victims' rights and public safety. So thank you for doing what you do.
And you're obviously doing this because you don't want other people to go through what you've gone through.
Yeah, I would like for Andy to make this a closed club. There should be no more new members for parents of murdered children. Every time someone sends me through social media a screenshot of this is the most recent horrific murder, it makes my stomach turn and I get physically ill. Because all I can think of is, July 6th, 2021.
Right.
And I think of my friends who've lost children and who've lost brothers and sisters. This needs to stop. And I'm imploring, my fellow community members. I don't do this because I like to be on TV. I never had a social media presence before this started. I do it because I am asking our community to come together because I believe, my son believed, I believe that we can do better. And if it means that every time I do one of these, it wipes me out for half a day, if not more. This sucks. This is the worst thing that I have to do, and it's something that I know I must do so that somebody out there might have that conversation with their brother or with their son and say, "Hey, son, I think I saw you had a gun in your closet. Well, talk to me about that. Let's put that away. Why do you need that?" Those conversations need to happen. They're bold and courageous conversations, and that's what I'm hoping people do on that side, and on the other side, vote.
Yeah, that's the thing we can all do, is use the power and vote.
So we have a really difficult segment tonight.
Yes, yeah, we're gonna go into more about these felons, these people that are charged with felon in possession of a weapon. We're gonna really take a deep dive into Jeremiah Jones, who's now accused of killing a 9-year-old girl. And when you hear his criminal history and what went on, you're gonna scratch your head, right? It's gonna be like, how did that even happen?
You're gonna get really ticked off.
Yes, yeah. And you know, that's the one thing too, as long as I've been reporting, I've learned that when you make people mad about something, that's when things change, because they think this is ridiculous. This has to stop. And we can make a change, and everything can get better. It's not an impossible thing to figure out or to fix. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to tune into Fox 26 News at 9 for Breaking Bond. Have a good one.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Andy. Great.
You bet.